Ibrahim Traoré, is an emerging political leader who is upsetting the political uppercut, not just in the Sahel region but on the continent and globally. Traoré is the current president of Burkina Faso. He came into power through a coup. He seized power in 2022. So he's been in power, let's say, for give or take 2 years and some few months. And the funny thing is that he came in the backdrop of 2 coups. So he first assisted his commanding officer. And then when he saw his colonel was going wayward, him and a group of his friends decided, you know what, it's not working for us. And so now they overthrew. So in 1 year there were 2 successive coups, 2022. So the second coup is now what brought him into power. This young leader has become a continental and, if you like, global sensation. Burkina Faso is a landlocked country in the Sahel region in West Africa. The former French colony is a land often plagued by recurring droughts and military coups, and gained its independence as a vulture in 1960. It's a country plagued with domestic and external forces, leading to decades of instability. When Burkina Faso, or rather when Traoré took over, he felt that one of the first things he needed to do was to change the relationship that Burkina Faso had with other powers, extracontinental powers. And at some stage, he was unhappy with the state of leadership. The situation, it's the truth. Being a military officer, he saw the leadership was not investing sufficient resources on issues of around security. Even the Burkina Faso army was supposed to be well equipped and armed by the French, which was not happening. In fact, close to 1.6 million people have gone back to the initial residences, where they've been driven out by gangs of terror. So it tells you that occupation of Burkina Faso by the French military government did not in itself enhance security in Burkina Faso. France had been exploiting Burkina Faso for the longest time. Burkina Faso is rich in its mineral reserves and is one of the world's largest producers of gold. Zinc, copper, phosphate, and limestone are also found in abundance here. The French colonial power had so much hold. The majority of their mining wealth was actually being owned and controlled by the French companies and not necessarily in the interest of Burkinabés. France retained deliberate interest not only just in Burkina Faso, but in most of the countries where they had influence in Western Africa, something they've maintained for a long time. And you know, for any country to be a success, you need 3 pillars. The first one is political stability, second is economic stability, and the third one is military or security stability. So he was unhappy with actually the state of affairs for the 3. So he begins by extricating Burkina Faso from these clutches of France, and there's a citizen uprising. They're burning the French flag. They're saying no to neocolonialism and all. This is coming in the backdrop of the anti-French sentiment that was sweeping through the Sahel. Hence you found when France was kicked out in Burkina. So it was also kicked out in Mali and Niger as well. He's a military officer, his word is as good as law. So at the flick of his fingers, the Frenchmen were told that it was nice doing business. Can we see your backs? He begins taking care of the minerals, particularly gold in Burkina Faso, and his aim is to use this mineral wealth to build Burkina Faso and to try and sort out Burkina Faso's problems. He comes in on that platform of reform, and hence those drastic moves in kicking out France and reorganizing the mineral sector and so on and so forth. He's had all the foreign companies that are in Burkina Faso's mining industry renegotiate those contracts. So he's renegotiating those contracts to make sure that they are fair. You may have seen posts online similar to this, claiming that Traoré has paid off all his country's debts and has taken full control over its mining sector. It's false. Currently, at least 3 foreign countries mine in Burkina Faso, including Russia, Canada, and Australia. The West African state also has an outstanding debt of around $10 billion to other countries. It is true, though, that the Juna has set up its very own mining company and also nationalized 2 gold mines previously owned by a London-listed firm. Despite this, though, there is no doubt that he has made some serious strides. One of the industries that has been rejuvenated is the cash arts industry, which presently is employing close to 1,300 people, 89% of them being women and 95% being young people. He says he wants a bright future for the young Burkinabés. Over 60% of the population are young people. They have buttered hopes, shattered dreams, so he wants to give them, a reason to smile again as Burkinabés. When you look at the food security pillar, pursuing food sufficiency is something that even the previous regime that was dethroned have not aggressively pursued. So he wants to see employment for the youth. He wants to see job creation for the country. He's providing farm implement, providing agricultural equipment, whether they are tractors, etc. What any visionary good African leader would want for their country, that's what exactly wants. And he's began in major strides. 2 new tomato processing plants have opened during his tenure, which aims to reduce tomato puree imports and boost local production. In early 2025, the country made history launching their first 100% electric vehicle named Itor, which is designed and assembled by local engineers. There are also reports that he slashed top government official salaries by 30%, increased civil servant workers' wages by 50%, and refuses to pay himself a presidential salary, though it must be said there's little evidence to prove this and local media hasn't reported it either. The result of all this is an improving economy despite the unrest. IMF Bank estimates a GDP growth of 5.5%. He's rejected loans from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and left the regional economic community ECOWAS, along with Nigeria and Mali, which they claim is an extended arm of Western interests. Representatives of the United Nations, European Union, and other multilateral organizations. The Burkinabes compared Captain Traoré, to a former leader who was there who was called Thomas Sankara, who came in the 70s and was a revolutionary leader in his own right, whose heart was in the right place. Thomas Sankara was a young military officer and Pan-Africanist leader, who became the president of the then Upper Volta in a coup in 1983. He was just 33 years old, and launched an unprecedented series of social, ecological, and economic reforms. In 1984, Sankara oversaw the renaming of the country to Burkina Faso, or the Land of the Upright People, and personally wrote its national anthem. Remember, this was a time African countries were fairly young in their independence. Most of them got their independence in the 60s, so he was fairly agitating for, a Pan-Africanist movement where Africans would be allowed to manage their own economies without a lot of neocolonialism. Traoré's vision today mirrors many aspects of Sankara's rule. The fact that both of them, and by way of comparison, are seen to have gotten into office by way of coup being nearly the same age, young in their 30s, being Pieuplantric, and taking a stance that is anti-imperialist. He came up with very radical ideas that were going to make former countries, extra-continental countries, that were benefiting from Burkina's wealth from not getting it. There have been close to 30 attempts of assassination on Traoré. There have been numerous attempts to dethrone him by way of coups. So, Human Rights Watch said in March 2025 that 3 journalists were arrested for reporting the suppression of the media. So, what we see online, etc., and what a lot of people are being fed day to day, are we getting the true story of what's going on in Burkina Faso? Well, actually, now you come to my subject. I spent a lot of time doing studies around misinformation, disinformation, malinformation as well. As propaganda, when you consume reports and research and data coming from Burkina Faso, they point towards structured campaigns around misinformation and disinformation, as well as propaganda. For you to get the actual picture, a clear picture of any country, several conditions must exist. Number 1, you must have a solid, agile civil society. Number 2, you must have a free media. A third condition is you must have a vibrant opposition where the opposition has got capacity and competence to take on the government again without being intimidated. I don't think we're getting the full story from Burkina Faso. Clearly, that is the truth. We're not getting the full story because, granted, as good as Ibrahim Traoré is, he's only one individual. Remember, he's the leader of a military junta, and the military in power are not known for the best of behavior. It is a fair point by the Human Rights Watcher to advance such kind of story and narrative, because that right is even protected by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the place of press freedom and freedom of speech. Multiple international bodies have accused the state of cracking down on the press and political dissent. Over a dozen foreign media outlets have been banned, making verifiable stories far less accessible to the wider world, leading some experts to ask what the government may be hiding. Independent sources suggest that violence in Burkina Faso is at some of its highest levels in years. The National Army has been accused of leading and/or allowing massacres of hundreds of civilians under Traoré's rule, including the murder of at least 130 people in early 2025. When I came home, some of the men saw the turn of events and went indoors. They came in and took them out. From inside our houses, we could hear our husbands screaming in pain from the beatings they were receiving before they executed them. Mourning by heavily armed men in Burkina military uniforms, riding motorcycles, pickup trucks, and armored vehicles. The villagers initially welcomed the arrival, but their joy was quickly shattered by gunfire. Several groups were executed on the spot, including wounded people left for dead who tried to flee. Some groups were tied up and severely beaten before being executed, another group of about 20. People escaped the massacres thanks to some soldiers who spared them. The state has control of only half its territory, with the other in the hands of Islamic jihadists, forcing many to flee to nearby countries such as the Ivory Coast. An al-Qaeda-affiliated group claimed to have killed at least 200 people and injured another 140 last October. Residents say they were forced by the army to dig trenches before a gang on motorbikes arrived shooting at them. The same terror group in May 2025 claimed to kill 200 soldiers in another attack. Although the army says the numbers were exaggerated, the long-fought conflict in Burkina Faso is perhaps the most overlooked in the world. Knowing that that's the epicenter of global terrorism, it was my time to illuminate that this is probably their weakest point and their needs to be sufficient resources going towards for the whole fight of terrorism in that country, period. This has been going on for X number of years, long time, decades. So if you bring in the fall of Libya, from the fall of Libya, especially the fall of Libya, is what catalyzes a lot of this. When Libya fell, we got all these offshoot groups that now some are loyal to ISIS, and others loyal to Al-Qaeda, others loyal to other, groups. All these radicalized groups have had time to build their presence and entrench themselves in the Sahel region. It will take more than it will take a concerted regional effort to actually weed out terrorism from that region. It will take years to combat the sheer scale of terrorism, not just in Burkina Faso, but in the larger region as well. It will be an uphill battle, but so too will be the development of an independent economy without their colonial power. Some of the tactics by which Traoré seeks to do this, though, have been met with some skepticism from experts. So one would have expected if you are accusing the whites of exploiting Burkinabés or exploiting Africans. When you kick out the whites, you are not going to replace them with whites. So you kick out France, but you replace France with Russia. So there's a contradiction. The logical thing to do is, if you're kicking out of the Frenchmen or you're kicking out France, then maybe you should be inviting Africans who've got capacity and competence in the assets you have to come and assist you in managing them. It was curious to see captains shaking hands and finding great camaraderie with Russia's President Putin. I think for him it was advantageous by this fact that when America started poking fingers into the affairs of Picasso and the French, government was poking fingers into the affairs of Theoso. It was easy to find solace in a political camaraderie with President Putin. Defense and a security. He looks to Russia as a big brother for that security umbrella. If I'm associated with Russia, Russia will come to my aid in case people invade me and all that. Countries have got the right to choose. Russia has extended a hand of friendship to Burkina Faso because of its own interests. Captain Traoré has extended a hand of friendship because of the interests of the Burkinabe people. The other reason why Traoré has looked to Russia is because of BRICS. BRICS is the acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. This organization has opened its new development bank, a quasi-IMF, a World Bank, kind of bank, to rival the IMF and World Bank. So what Traoré is looking at is getting development financing where there will be not too many terms and conditions. One will not be surprised to see in the not-too-distant future Burkina Faso making an application to join the BRICS. The World Bank and IMF are not going to fund him because of the tag, came into power through the back door, and you know you didn't follow democratic Western ideals. But when Traoré is now a friend of Russia, and Russia is a big player in BRICS, it's very easy for him to get development. Financing for his country. It's very easy for him to get no-strings-attached kind of financing without them asking about his governance, his human rights records. That's why he's a friend of Russia. Russia will lend you the money without asking those tough questions. The Burkina people have embraced Traoré, and so have millions across the world. He's portrayed as the new god of African leadership. But should the means by which he gained power be of concern? And is he the blueprint for how future heads of state should lead? In a democratic setup like Kenya, you go to the people every 5 years. You win an election, and then you give it a mandate in most countries for a fixed term. But if you have taken power through maybe a coup, and you're a military, or you are a military dictator, then the only thing people know is the entry point. People are not very sure about the exit. There are reasons to be unsettled by how Traoré got into office through which is extra-constitutional because the Burkinabe people had put into office somebody else. It is possible for us also to be curious by the fact that even though he got into office through extra-constitutional means, the Burkinabe people have thrown their arms around him by way of embrek. So elections were scheduled for July 2024. In Burkina Faso, that didn't happen because Traoré said it wasn't a priority considering the country's instability. What's your opinion on that? Would you say that's valid? I hear you. That's a tough question, but I'll try. Whenever you're trying to rebuild a country that has been torn by violence and war or has been at conflict, especially civil war for a long time, or internal conflict, the most important pillar is security. So security is always the major thing. So he's not wrong on that. You cannot have development in an atmosphere of insecurity. However, we can't stop everything in the name of security. So the pockets in the areas which are secure, which I am sure they are, there are certain pockets of Burkinas that are pretty secure. We need to see that we are now building the schools. We are building the roads, hospitals. Kids have gone back to school. Markets have been reopened. Traoré, as interim leader, has postponed elections until 2029 to allow for another 5 years with the hope of stabilizing the country. So my prayer and my hope is that him being a liberation and Pan-Africanist revolutionary leader, he will know when to walk away. The biggest problem we have with these revolutionary leaders is that they do not know when to walk away from power. Once they have tasted the power, they have seen the trappings of power and what power gets them. Temptation of believing they are the messiahs for their country, without knowing they were there to serve a purpose. Deliver their country, and then hand it over back to civilians. So let's hope he gives back that power. You'd rather have a democratically elected leader who is not delivering than a military junta that is not delivering. They came to the office using the power of the gun. We must encourage people to come to the office using the power of the vote. Traoré remains in power despite several foiled coup attempts, one of the latest being a major plot to overthrow him in April 2025. According to the army, if we remain stable, what's in store for the future of the country? I always state that if you have the right man at the top, everything else follows suit. So with Traoré and Burkina Faso, and at this trajectory, it means he's going to put in place systems and institutions that are going to help Burkina Faso into posterity. Madame, we miss you. Africa is endowed with mineral resources, with riches, human resources. We have a lot going for us. The problem that African states suffer from is the lack of the political will for their leaders to do the right thing by their people. The exploitation of natural resources in the on the African continent, has been to the advantage of the imperialist agencies, and to the greater disadvantage, perpetually so, of the African continent. When you look at a country such as Nigeria, that with the immense wealth of crude oil, the oil that they mine, that country suffers from immense power outages and energy challenges, yet they export oil for the benefit of other countries. It is a critical point, and as we are getting to the sunset of the first quarter of the 21st century, that the African continent needs a convergence point of thought on leadership issues, constitutionalism, the significance and utility of critical bodies such as IGAD, such as the African,